Taking care of animals is a passion for veterinarians, but the job can take a toll on their mental health.
It's a heavy, heavy profession. It's a beautiful profession. I'm so proud to be a part of it. But the things that we see and deal with on a day-to-day basis, um, we we give and we give and we give to our patients. We give and we give and we give to our clients, and we oftentimes, very commonly, neglect ourselves.
People who work with animals say it's their life's calling. While veterinarians experience many rewarding aspects, the demanding nature of their work can have negative impacts on mental health. Ohio State's veterinary program understands this difficulty and is putting measures in place to help future professionals. Brad Ryan graduated from Ohio State in 2016, but throughout his journey as a veterinary student, he struggled with mental health.
Everybody was competing at this level that I was trying to keep up with. And when I started to doubt myself, it started with just a little self-doubt, a little anxiety. Then that became, chronic test anxiety, eventually depression. And then within the first year, it was persistent suicidal ideation.
According to a CDC report, veterinarians are more likely to die by suicide than the general population. Yet enrollment reports show that veterinary schools continue to grow with an average annual increase of 2.7% over the past decade. The Ohio State University, which has one of the highest enrollment rates, is home to one of the nation's largest schools of veterinary medicine. This growth brings the issue of mental health to the forefront. In 2015, the tragic death of David Hilton, an Ohio State veterinary student, sent shockwaves through the entire college community.
A vet student killed himself, and it shook me to my core because I realized how close I had come to making that same decision. And when somebody actually does it, you realize, wow, this isn't always just limited to our thoughts. Thoughts actually have the power to manifest into incredibly tragic consequences.
Ohio State's Department of Veterinary Medicine created the Be Well initiatives in response to veterinary mental health. The plan incorporates 9 dimensions of wellness into the 4-year curriculum, having them serve as required components. A 10th dimension focusing on digital wellness is underway. In 2022, the college also shifted to a pass and fail format in hopes to ease the pressure and encourage collaboration. Administrators say the goal is to promote a culture of health and well-being and to break the stigma surrounding mental health.
The greatest power comes from sharing your story. And the stigma is what kept me silent for so long. I did not tell anybody while I was in vet school that I was suffering with suicidal thoughts. In fact, I was voted, out of 160 plus students, I was voted the classmate with the best sense of humor. People thought I was the funny guy. People thought that I was a joyful person, but it was a mask.
Katie Reed, clinical psychologist, says it's important for people to understand the warning signs of mental health.
If your friend is a typically outgoing person and they seem withdrawn for extended periods of time, not responding to texts like they typically do, or declining social invitations that they would normally say yes to, those are things to pay attention to. Students talking about, just not wanting to be here, or life would be better if I weren't around, I'm too much of a burden. Also changes in substance use and behavior around using substances.
Students, especially since the pandemic, have increased on stress, anxiety, depression, and really want to make sure that we're taking care of our students and helping them get the skills and resources that they need.
Shadow Montag, a second-year veterinary student at Ohio State, suffered a traumatic brain injury during his second year in high school. He was thrown off his horse and left with the cognitive ability of a 5-year-old.
During my recovery time, I spent a lot of time with my horse, which led me into veterinary medicine, just having that human-animal bond.
But vet school brought its own challenges.
My first semester was quite the biggest disaster I've ever experienced in my life. A lot of learning curves, not only with vet school, but my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer, and learning how to navigate through those, taking those big load, heavy exams, and learning how to study strategically through the curriculum.
I guess takes a village, right? We all have to look out for one another and encourage people to advocate for themselves, to let us know that they need help.
Big challenges I faced was just how do I manage my own stress? And how do I deal with imposter syndrome? Do I belong here? Do I feel welcome here? Because on the outside, and I think everyone has a great shell. Everyone wants to perceive to everyone that everything is okay. But it wasn't until spring semester, my first year, that I had to, okay, I gotta be honest with myself. And that was a big challenge, to hold yourself accountable to a certain standard and reach out for help.
I think we've made amazing strides in removing that stigma, and letting students know that this is accessible. I also want to credit, I think, our Gen Z and younger millennial students for being more interested and more proactive in their mental health. So therapy is not as kind of taboo for those generations. They're excited about having therapists on campus and excited to use those services.
The stigma and the shame is in large the fundamental piece that has to be addressed so that there's a cultural change, so that people feel like, oh, this thing that I'm feeling or experiencing, even if it's just today, even if it's just this week, it doesn't have to be persistent. It might just be a moment in time. But, when you're taught to just keep it to yourself, suck it up, only weak people have these kind of feelings and thoughts. We can't be surprised when people reach a breaking point and self-destruct, and in the worst case scenario, take their own lives.
There's things within the profession that are not talked about enough, and that is compassion fatigue, burnout, long hours, just feeling helpless at times, and also trying to meet the client's expectations with their pets, and the salary of veterinarians and the amount of student loan debt that we're acquiring is a big factor. So I think that is a lot of the strong pillars that are the caveat to the statistics of why it's such a high suicide rate.
One of the common threads that you'll typically find when you ask a veterinarian to describe themselves is the word perfectionist. And, my number one goal is to make perfectionism a bad word, to make that a dirty word. Because that is going to catch up to you when you realize that you're never going to be able to meet this highest bar that you set for yourself.
So we admit students into the program that are all type A, overachieving, they're all great students, and they're used to being those great students. And sometimes it's really hard on them when they see a case or they work with a client and they can't come up with what they think is the ideal solution, and they take it very personally. And so we want to make sure that they understand that, in this profession, you can't always be perfect. And so I think that's one thing that as a profession, we've gotten better about acknowledging that, accepting that, and now actually trying to overtly teach that.
It's okay sharing a story, because you're not a victim, but instead you're an advocate of this, because you don't know whose lives you can touch. And that has been monumental in my veterinary career as a student, is talking about it more.
I think the biggest thing is to be proactive with yourself, with your loved ones. If you're concerned, ask. Asking a friend if they are feeling unsafe is not going to make them less safe. It's actually going to start the conversation to getting them to a place of psychological safety.
Lifelong training that you've done to hide that has to be the moment where you realize, like, I owe it to myself and I owe it to my colleagues to start to dismantle that stigma by just speaking my truth.
It's very important that we look out for one another, and I think particularly with students, I always try to remind them, you see each other all the time. You are in class together, you know each other, you're friends. Your concern for each other is going to be very important in getting that person help.
I do believe some people are still shy about it, but I do think we are moving the needle a little bit with it.
We have a mental health crisis everywhere, and I think the more that we can see ourselves reflected in the shared stories of of other people, regardless of whether or not they're veterinarians, I think the more likely it is that we're going to connect with people that can pull us through it.
Caring for animals is a job that comes with emotional highs and lows. By raising awareness about these underlying issues, we open up the conversation about mental health and suicide, paving the way towards a healthier and happier lifestyle.
It's about acknowledging your limitations and not being ashamed of them. Just saying this is what a human being is. A veterinarian, although we are superheroes in many ways to many people, certainly to our clients, but we're also human beings.